Great. So just for the recording, WSDA Farm just like purchasing grant application information session. We will have time for questions at the end, but to make sure that we get through all of the information and material, we'll ask that you hold your questions. Please write them down. You can type them into the chat. We may not answer them until we reach the Q&A session, and some of your questions may be answered as we go. We have a number of folks on the call today. You're welcome to keep your cameras on or off, whichever you're more comfortable with. But we will ask that you stay muted during the call until we get to Q&A, at which point we welcome you to voice any questions as well as typing them into the chat. Right. Okay, so I wanted to provide just a quick background on the Washington State Department of Agriculture's Farm to School program. So within this program, we're dedicated to fostering relationships between schools and agricultural producers in Washington State. One of our goals is to support economic opportunities for farmers while educating students about the connections between food, farming, health, and the environment. We do this by providing information, training and workshops, peer learning opportunities, and technical assistance to food service providers, as well as local farmers who are working to supply healthy Washington grown food to youth across the state. These are just some of the programming examples that you may be familiar with. Taste Washington Day, our annual event to feature Washington grown foods and school meals. And then of course, the most recent addition, the Farm to School purchasing grants, which is why you are all here. So to provide some background, the Washington State Legislature provided $5 million in the 2021-23 state budget to make grants and expand the WSDA Farm to School program. So we're really really excited to offer the purchasing grants to support the purchase and use of Washington grown foods and child nutrition programs. This is a competitive reimbursement grant, and we administer the program in partnership with the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction. A few of the grant goals are to support the development and sustainability of farm to child nutrition program efforts. We seek to increase the amount and variety of local foods that are served in child nutrition programs. We also want to support purchasing from small and mid-sized farmers and food producers, as well as see increased purchasing from historically underrepresented farmers and ranchers. So these are some of the goals of the purchasing grant program. I wanted to share just kind of some background on the current funding round. So this is a new program. The applications for the first round were last fall, and we've awarded over $1.5 million to 52 grantees in this current period, which began in January and ends in August. And some of the products and producers that have been supported through this grant so far, even in just the first 4 months, include the purchase of over 250 local products from over 100 local farms and food producers. So just to kind of give you a sense of the opportunity and impact that this grant can have. And so some of the items that grantees purchase currently are produce, dairy, meat and poultry, breads and bakery goods, fish, seafood, beans and lentils. And we'll go into what you can use these grant funds for in more detail, but just wanted to provide some examples of how grantees are spending the funds currently. So I know we have folks on the call who are current grantees and those that are interested in applying for the first time. I wanted to point out a few key changes or just things to note that are different between the first round of funding and the second round of funding. So first of all, the timeline. The grant period for next year begins September 1st and ends June 30th. So the key difference here is that we're not including summer months. This has to do with the the funding timelines. So just keep in mind when you're preparing your applications to be thinking about purchases from September through June. The second thing is that we have additional funds available. We have up to $3 million available to grant for next year. And we are going to look at your October, your lunch counts from October 2021 of this year. So we'll go into detail on how the eligible funding amounts are determined, but just wanted to note that difference as well. And then in addition to food purchases, you can now apply for funds to cover non-food costs. These non-food costs we'll talk about again in more detail later in the presentation. But these are things that directly support the development and sustainability of your farm to child nutrition program efforts. Okay, so the first thing people usually want to know is who can apply for this program. So there's kind of 4 categories of applicants. The first is active sponsors of the National School Lunch Program, so typically school districts. The second are current and active sponsors of the Child and Adult Care Food Program. This is for the childcare only. So this could be individual child care centers that are sponsors of CACFP. This could be an organization with multiple child care sites, the sponsoring organization, or it can be this sponsoring organization of family daycare homes. So individual family daycare homes are not eligible to apply themselves, but if they're interested in accessing this grant, they should talk to the sponsoring organization. Additionally, tribal schools and tribal early learning centers are eligible to apply even if they do not operate either the NSLP or the CACFP. One other requirement in order to receive grant funds currently this is a federal, we're using federal funds for this grant in the next year, is to be registered in the federal system for award management. This is known as SAM.gov. This is essentially replacing the DUNS number, which hopefully many of you are familiar with. If you're not sure if your organization, if your sponsor has a SAM ID or a DUNS number, check with your business office. They're typically the ones that would know and be able to provide this with you. Provide this to you. One important thing to note is if this is new for you, registration is free. You should never pay to register and receive a SAM number. So please keep that in mind, and we'll be sharing out this slide deck, which includes some links to additional resources for getting set up in SAM. Okay, we're going to go through the application timeline. I have 2 slides. This one is specific to, just has a slight difference for sponsors of the National School Lunch Program and Child and Adult Care Food Program. So we've prepared application guides. These contain all of the information that you need to prepare, gather the information and prepare responses that you'll submit in the official application. The official application will be a form package in iGrants. This is an application that OSPI uses for competitive grant applications. We're just finalizing that form package with a few updates, and that'll be live soon. The application will close Monday, July 11th at 4 p.m. Reviews will occur during July, and then we will announce awards in August in time for the funding period to start September 1st. And then for tribal schools and tribal early learning centers, we have a separate application guide for you that's also been posted. And this is posted on the Farm to School Grant website, which we'll share a link to. You have a separate application form, excuse me, that is posted to the website. So you can go ahead and download that now. It's available. The application close date is the same for everyone, Monday, July 11th. And then again, the review and grant periods are the same as well. So switching back to our NSLP and CACFP sponsors, how to apply. This is broken down in kind of 5 high-level steps. So the first thing we suggest you do is to download the application guide. This includes step-by-step instructions for everything, beginning with creating your account in iGrants to submitting your final application in iGrants. If you don't have an account in iGrants, go ahead and begin to request that. It can take a little bit of time to get that set up. In the meantime, use the application guide to gather the required information and begin to prepare your answers to the application questions. You can also begin work on your purchasing plan. We'll go into more detail on this later in the presentation. And then the final step is submitting your application in iGrants by the deadline. For tribal programs, similar process. Go ahead and download the application guide that's specific to you. You'll gather the required information, develop your purchasing plan, and then you will submit the application form and your purchasing plan either by email or regular mail directly to WSDA. And the details on all of these steps are included in the application guides. Okay, so how much money can you get with this grant? So we have adjusted some of the funding formula and some of the tiers from last year. So this should look familiar, but a little bit different. So essentially, the funding amounts are based on the number of meals served in October, number of lunches served in October 2021. And for school districts, so we'll focus on tiers 1 through 3 to start. So for school districts that served more than 30,000 meals during October, the maximum amount of funding that you can request under this grant is determined by the formula, the number of lunches served times 9 months, which is the period of the grant, times 12 cents. That's 12 cents per meal. And that is going to be the maximum amount of funding that you could request. You do not have to request the full amount if you don't think you'll use it or spend it down during next year. But that's going to determine how much you can apply for. For everybody, for school districts that serve less than that amount, you don't have to do any calculating. Just find yourself either in tier 2 or tier 3. So for tier 2, this is for districts that serve between 10,000 and 3,000 meals. You can apply for up to $32,400. For districts that serve less than 10,000, you can apply for up to $20,000. And again, we wanted to provide some additional funding and then also flexibility in the amount that you can apply for. But if this seems like too much money for your program at this time, you can certainly request a lesser amount. And then for our childcare programs and early learning, the majority of applicants will likely fall under tier 5. So those that served less than 18,500 meals in October, lunches in October, you can apply for a grant up to $20,000 or less. And then for any really large centers or sponsors out there that served more than 18,500 lunches in October this past year, you'll use the same funding formula to determine how much you can apply for. For those really large programs that fall into tier 1 or tier 4, we have developed a funding calculator to help you figure out how much you can request. So there's a link on this slide where you'll be able to download the calculator. This is what the calculator looks like. It's an Excel spreadsheet. You'll see an empty box here on the screen. It's highlighted in yellow. You'll enter the number of lunches that you served in October of this past year, 2021. And then the yellow box will automatically calculate below. Okay. So now we're going to move into what you can buy or what you can do with your grant, with these grant funds. So as I mentioned, you can request funds for food costs, Majority of the grant is for food costs, but you can also request for non-food costs. So first, we're going to talk about the allowable food costs. So this has to be at least 75% of your total grant request. And you can purchase whole and minimally processed fruits, vegetables, herbs, meat, seafood, legumes, and grains that are 100% grown, raised, or caught in Washington state. Minimally processed foods include foods that have been refrigerated, adjusted for size, such as peeling or slicing or dicing. They could be washed and packed. They can have ascorbic acid or other preservatives to prevent oxidation, but generally haven't been changed substantially from their original state. So any of those types of products, whole or minimally processed, have to be grown, raised, caught, or harvested in Washington state. We have a photo of some beautiful salad greens here that were harvested from the Olympia School District student farm. And we'll talk in a minute about where to source food. So the other category of allowable food costs include processed or packaged foods that contain at least 51% of the raw ingredients that are grown or raised in Washington state. So an example here would be yogurt or cheese, a processed dairy product that includes at least 51% milk from Washington dairies. Some schools are purchasing bakery items, pizza dough, muffin mixes. These would have to contain at least 51% flour from Washington. We have a sample form that is required as part of the reimbursement process. So it's not something you have to worry about for the application. But if you'd like to look ahead to see what that looks like, it's also linked on this page. In one example, I want to just highlight for processed products, this is a really great opportunity to partner with another local business. So we've had a couple of grantees work with a local bakery to source local flour and then produce bread or some other baked products specifically for the school that meets this 51% requirement for reimbursement. So just an idea of how you can meet this for processed food. There are some products and vendors that are not eligible, not allowable for reimbursement. The item that we are not reimbursing is Washington produced fluid milk, including fluid milk substitutes. Part of the reason is that a lot of milk is already produced and served coming from Washington farms, and so we want these funds to support the purchase of new and different products. You can still source Washington dairy, yogurt, cheese, or things that are made with milk as an allowable expense. And then the other category of foods that we won't reimburse are products that are ordered through another program. So if you get fresh produce that's locally grown through DoD Fresh or USDA Foods, or if you participate in the USDA Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program or the USDA pilot project for unprocessed fruits and vegetables, you can source local through these different programs, which is great. But because they have a separate funding stream, we will not reimburse products that are ordered through these programs. Okay. So now on to allowable non-food costs. This is the new category. And so we're allowing up to 25% of the total grant funds to be used for non-food costs. And so these can include things like equipment, materials and supplies, or staff time, and other distribution costs that directly support the development or sustainability of your farm to school or farm to early care program. We recognize that it takes a lot to do local purchasing and farm to school. It's a different process. It takes additional time, additional preparation. And so our goal is to be able to support these additional direct costs associated with all of the steps of farm to school. So now on to allowable non-food costs. This is the new category. So we're allowing up to 25% of the total grant funds to be used for non-food costs. And so these can include things like equipment, materials and supplies, or staff time, and other distribution costs that directly support the development or sustainability of your farm to school or farm to early care program. We recognize that it takes a lot to do local purchasing and farm to school. It's a different process. It takes additional time, additional preparation. And so our goal is to be able to support these additional direct costs associated with all of the steps of farm to school. There's a long list of examples on this slide, as well as in the application guide. And if you have questions about things that you don't see here, reach out to us, and we can talk through any ideas that you have that would potentially fall under this category. Okay, so now we're going to dive into the different sections of the application. We're going to go through this fairly quickly, but just to remind everyone that all of this information that you're seeing presented on the slides today is also included in those application guides. So this is a little bit of repetition, but want to make sure that everyone has this information. We won't go through the contact information piece. That's fairly self-explanatory. So we'll start with the baseline farm to school purchasing. These questions are not scored in the application, but they help us with our evaluation to kind of give us a sense of what your purchasing practices were before and after participating in the grant program. So this just asks you questions about how much and the types of products and the sources of local products that you purchased from in the previous school year. The next part of the application asks about program and community characteristics. So for this, we're looking at indicators of need, such as the average free and reduced price meal eligibility for your district or center. We ask for the child food insecurity rate. This number comes from Feeding America, which has developed a map where you can search by county and find the percentage for your county. We'll ask if you are a tribal program. And then this last question is for school districts only. And this looks at other programs that you offer that support increased participation in school meals. We do score school district applicants separate from childcare applicants. So hopefully the childcare centers aren't concerned about not responding to this question. And then we have 6 short answer questions. The expectation is to write 3 to 5 sentences in response to each of these questions. And the first 2 questions have to do with local purchasing, planning, and implementation. So we ask about your experience, and we really want to prioritize and support programs that have less experience with local purchasing, recognizing that there's a lot of barriers, and that now that we have this additional funding to support local purchasing, we want to prioritize programs that may not have had the opportunity to do it before. We also will ask you to describe the specific activities that you'll use to incorporate new locally grown foods into your meal programs. We also are interested in your plans for student and child engagement. So how you will engage students in your program around farm to school or farm to childcare. Then we have 2 questions that focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So for this, kind of focused on 2 areas. One is around culturally relevant meals. So we'll ask how you plan to incorporate and promote culturally relevant menu items for your student population. And then the second one is how any plans that you have for reaching out to and partnering with historically underrepresented farmers and food producers. And then the last question relates to the non-food costs. So this is, you don't have to answer this question if you're only requesting funding for direct food costs, but if you are including items on that non-food cost category, we'll ask you to explain how these costs and associated activities support the development and sustainability of your efforts to purchase and promote more local foods. And although this isn't scored, because not everyone will answer it, we will take this into consideration as part of the overall evaluation of your application. And I am going to now pass it over to Nicole to talk about the purchasing plan.
Thanks, Annette. So the purchasing plan is included in the application, but it is available right now online. So you can either go to the grant webpage, or after these slides are provided, you can use these slides to click the hyperlink purchasing plan to access that. Excel document, and you can start working on it right now. So because it's already quite, we have a few months until this grant launches, and we don't know if you're going to be determined as an eligible recipient. We understand the estimates are going to happen, and they're totally acceptable. We are not going to we're not going to hold you to what is listed here. It's more of a guide for you and for us to see how you plan to implement this, as well as to make sure that you are aware of how to procure these foods. So we understand plans change, and that's okay. And flexibility is an important part of farm to school purchasing, as I'm sure you all know, with the changing of climates, and as we've had a very underwhelming spring this year. So, but this plan is your best projection of how you plan to use the grant funds, and awarded applicants will not be penalized. That being said, if you are awarded, it is really important that you honor any commitments based on your plan, as the farmers or ranchers and processors that you contract with have to plan well in advance to produce these items and really rely on that income. So keep that in mind. So we'll go over the 6 main steps for completing the plan. First, you need to determine how much you plan to spend on non-food cost, ensuring it does not exceed that total of 25% of the total amount requested. And you would enter this information on the non-food cost tab prior to entering the information on your purchasing plan tab. That way it can kind of, take that amount and it rolls up into the total tab. The second step would be determine what local products you want to serve and when. And we'll go into this a little bit more about some strategies to use or some tools and resources you can use. But with everyone having to plan their menu items in advance, hopefully this is not too hard. We also need to determine how much of the items you will need and determine the unit price, so we can apply that to your budget. You need to explore sourcing options. Who are you going to use as your vendor? Are you going to work directly with farmers and ranchers? Are you going to work via food hub, farmers market, or grocery store? And then you'll need to upload at the very end, when everything's finished, you will need to upload your plan and iGrants. Next slide, please. So what's in season? WSDA to help you get started with identifying potential local foods. You could add to your menu. I really recommend checking out the Washington grown seasonality charts, which identify the month of the year which certain fruits and vegetables and herbs are in season in Washington state. These seasonality charts can be really helpful tool when planning your menu and reaching out about product availability. There's 2 charts. There's one that's for vegetables and legumes and one that's specific to fruits and herbs. And again, this can be found on as one of those additional resources on the grant webpage, and also it will be provided in this, as a hyperlink in the slide. Next slide, please. So this is a really cool tool that was developed by it's called the Fresh Produce Purchasing and Prep Guide. And it was created by an organization called Growing Minds, and they're located in North Carolina. So if you decide to use this tool, please keep in mind that not all of this product listed may be available in Washington as a Washington grown product. The goal of the tool is to help children increase their consumption of fresh fruits and vegetables. So it's all about how can you integrate fresh fruits and vegetables into your meal patterns. There are 3 guides that are available, and that they follow the USDA meal patterns based on ages. So we have a guide that's for 1 to 2-year-olds, to 3 to 5-year-olds, and 6 to 18-year-olds. And each of these Excel workbooks, they come in Excel or PDF form, but I highly recommend the Excel workbooks. Each of them have a separate tab for each meal. So there's one for breakfast, there's one for lunch and dinner, and that's combined, and one for snack. And the Excel versions allow you to just plug in the exact amount of servings you need to create the meal. So that's really cool, because then it produces poundage. So once you select the meal, you would find the food item you're looking for and enter the number of servings that you need to produce in the column that says enter servings. Then you will need to get the amount to purchase in pounds for the number of servings entered. The amounts are calculated for a specific age group, just remember that, and represent minimum serving sizes required to meet USDA meal patterns. So make sure you're using the correct guide for the age appropriate for the children that you're serving. And just also keep in mind that amounts are rounded up to the nearest quarter pound, so account for that. So just note that the guide for 6 to 18-year-olds for lunch and dinner look a little different compared to the guide for all other age categories. And that's because the serving size of the first vegetable and that of the second vegetable or fruit is not the same for 6 to 18-year-olds. Next slide, please. So where do you buy local food? Well, we talked about this a little bit, but Washington grown foods can be purchased directly from Washington farmers and ranchers, from food hubs, which are becoming widely more popular and more available throughout the state. You can also work with farmer cooperatives, processors, a produce vendor, or a broadline distributor. We encourage direct sourcing as much as possible for this grant, because keep in mind that one of the goals of the grant is to increase purchasing from small and mid-sized farmers and food producers. Also, keep in mind that 25% of grant funds can be used to purchase from a school garden or farm. So if your district or childcare center has a garden or a farm on site or within the district, you can purchase up to 25%. You can use up to 25% of your food purchasing funds to procure food from that source. Next slide, please. So one great tool that we wanted to share with you to find local food is called the Washington Food and Farm Finder, which is put on by Eat Local First. And so it helps to find farmers, ranchers, food hubs, farmers market distributors in the area. And all you have to do is plug in your zip code and determine how far away you want to source your products. So I think it goes from anywhere from 25 miles to 200 miles. And you can also filter by product type of vendor, and you can also look for vendors who specifically sell to wholesale. So this link here is specific to wholesale. WSDA also has some other great resources on their Finding Farms webpage that could also help as well. Next slide, please. Pricing. So how do you determine prices? Well, all prices listed on your purchasing plan are understood to be estimates. I'm just going to reiterate that. But to determine these prices, we suggest reaching out to your local farmers or ranchers to request fresh sheets. And WSDA has a really great fresh sheet template to help you solicit prices from farmers if they don't have fresh sheets themselves. Food hubs and distributors often also have fresh sheets available on their website, or by subscription, you can go to their website and it's to be included in emails that go out with fresh sheets either weekly. Most likely it would be weekly. You can also review prices listed on food hub websites. And it's also a great way to identify some local processed products that you might wish to procure that you didn't know about. There's some really great products on there on these food hub websites that you might not have thought of to be a local product, but some processor has created them. So please note that not all items listed on these fresh sheets or websites are Washington grown. And so keep that in mind. And for processed products, you will still need to verify that they meet the 71% requirement. One thing we have seen, though, is food hubs are really trying to support these Washington grown procurement efforts. So if you decide to go the route of the food hub, we really encourage you to reach out to them and to let them know that you're participating in this farm to school grant if you receive it, or you're trying to participate in this farm to school grant, and that you intend to purchase only Washington grown or raised products. Michelle, who provided an example in the chat, talked about the Northwest Food Hub Network developing 2 bake items using Washington grown wheat and then creating it to meet the grain equivalent. So that's a great example because we're seeing more and more these food hubs are trying to support these Washington grown, not only Washington grown specific purchases, but also school standards and meeting those nutrition standards outlined in the National School Lunch Program, as well as the child and adult care feeding program. So one thing, I don't have a slide for this, but once you've completed your non-food cost tab and your purchasing plan tab, make sure you look at the total tab and to see if it reflects your funding request. but also make sure that it follows the allowable costs that the table Annette shared earlier on. Once your purchasing plan is complete, you would just need to upload it to iGrants as part of your application. And I'll pass it back over to Annette.
Great, thanks, Nicole. So we're getting towards the end, which is great because I think we'll have plenty of time for questions. Just wanted to touch briefly on the reimbursement process. So if you are awarded a purchasing grant for the 2022-23 school year, essentially you submit a monthly expense report that looks very similar to the purchasing plan. That includes all of your food and non-food expenses that have been paid for within that month. And then we review that and process reimbursement. The important thing that I want to point out here is that because we are using federal dollars for this grant, all grant recipients are required to save invoices, receipts, and other supporting documentation for expenses for a period of up to 6 years. So it's just something to kind of be thinking about and being mindful of from the beginning. So you have a system for saving and recording all of this documentation. We also may be requesting additional documentation if needed to verify that items are Washington grown. Once we close the application and conduct the review and announce the awards, there will be additional training for awarded recipients on what this reimbursement process entails and all of those requirements. And then the last point on this slide is that grantees are reimbursed for 100% of eligible expenses up to the total award amount. So even though we're kind of using the meals as a way to assess or determine how much funding you can apply for, meals are not a factor in determining reimbursement. It's just the full cost of the expense. And then the last piece is grant reporting. So we try and keep reporting pretty light. We ask grantees to complete one interim report and one final report. This reporting these surveys are designed to assess progress, to help us evaluate the purchasing grant program and identify opportunities for improvement. Okay, and technical assistance. So during this application period, we're here to help. Both myself and Nicole are available to answer questions. We also are partnering with SNAP Ed and WSU Extension to identify a network of providers that are available to provide assistance, technical assistance with the application for those that are eligible. We'll have more details coming soon about how to contact providers for assistance and vice versa. So that'll be posted to the Purchasing Grants website as soon as we have it. And then also on the website, but we wanted to include them here, is a long list of additional resources. Some of these resources we referred to specifically earlier on in the presentation, but there are some additional items that may be of interest. Specifically, I think, something for childcare centers that has a really great resource. There's lots of resources on the Farm to ECE community practice page, as well as a free online training in Farm to ECE, Farm to Early Care and Education. So if you're new to Farm to School and thinking about applying for this grant, those are some places to start, just to wrap your mind around it. That is our last slide of content.